Welcome, I am Jaxon, and in today's episode, we are going to look at influencers who were mauled by animals after one mistake, from a captive tiger who finally had enough to a Komodo dragon that effortlessly attacked someone without a notice. But first, let's talk about a walking safari that turned deadly after a lion encounter. It was June 14th, 2014, and the mid-morning heat had already settled over a private wildlife conservancy in southern Kenya's Rift Valley corridor. The dry season had pushed temperatures into the upper 80s by 9 in the morning, and the open grassland stretched flat in every direction, broken only by scattered thorn bush and the occasional granite outcrop. A small, independently operated safari camp ran daily walking excursions for guests willing to pay a premium for foot-level access to the bush. Lila Hart, a 27-year-old travel influencer from Cape Town, South Africa, had built her following on the premise that conventional tourism was too sanitized. Originally a fashion model, she had rebranded herself into what her audience recognized as an adrenaline-driven wildlife content creator. Her feed was a catalog of close encounters, standing beside free-roaming elephants, wading in rivers known for crocodiles, crouching within yards of buffalo. She had arrived at the conservancy 2 days earlier and had already drawn quiet concern from camp staff after pushing the boundaries of 2 previous excursions. The guides had talked about her the night before. That detail matters. The walking safari carried Hart and 4 other guests under the guidance of a 44-year-old Kenyan guide with over 16 years of experience. An armed ranger accompanied the group as standard protocol. Before departure, the guide briefed all guests on a single non-negotiable rule: maintain formation at all times. Staff would later give conflicting accounts of what Hart had been told. One recalled the guide pulling her aside and repeating the instruction, directly after she had drifted during the previous morning's walk. The guide said he had warned her twice. Hart's traveling companion could not confirm whether a second warning had been given. Approximately 2 hours in, the group located a pride of 6 lions resting in broken shade near a dry lugga. The guide held them at roughly 90 yards. Hart began filming immediately. Her angle was partially obstructed by a low acacia. She moved laterally, then crouched low to the ground, separating herself from the group by roughly 12 feet. African lions are the apex predators of the open savanna, and their hunting behavior is built around one principle: exploit any deviation from the expected. Adult females weigh up to 280 pounds and are capable of reaching speeds approaching 35 miles per hour in short bursts. A figure that separates, drops low, and goes still reads differently than an upright cluster of humans. The pride had been resting, but one lioness had been watching since the group arrived. A crouching, isolated figure at that distance was no longer a tourist. It was a target profile. There is something genuinely difficult to process about that moment. The thing that made Hart's content compelling, getting closer than anyone else, was the exact same thing that made her vulnerable the moment she stepped out of formation. That tension between the instinct to get the shot and the rule that exists to keep you alive is one that I think a lot of people underestimate until they are standing in the grass and the rule starts feeling like an obstacle rather than a boundary. The lioness broke from cover and closed the distance in approximately 5 seconds. The guide's shout and the ranger's raised rifle were both reactions to something that had already happened. Hart was struck from the side and driven into the ground. The ranger fired and the lioness disengaged. The remaining guests had not moved from formation. Hart's camera had been running when she moved out of position. The footage was recovered and submitted to the Regional Wildlife Authority. It has never been publicly released. Investigators cited the graphic nature of the attack and the ongoing liability review, and Hart's family requested through a South African legal representative that it not be circulated. That request was honored. Hart was unresponsive at the scene and pronounced dead upon arrival at the nearest district facility over an hour away by unpaved road. A Regional Wildlife Authority launched a separate review into walking safari standards across privately operated conservancies in the corridor. The camp suspended walking excursions for the remainder of the season. Whether Hart had been warned once or twice was never definitively resolved. The other 4 guests followed every instruction and returned to camp without injury. The distance between those 2 outcomes was 12 feet, and a decision that took less than a second to make. That attack unfolded in open grassland, in full daylight, with an experienced guide standing yards away. The next story moves into a managed facility facility in Southeast Asia where the animal was familiar, the handlers were present, and the mistake came down to a single moment of misplaced confidence. It was April 22nd, 2015, and the afternoon heat in northern Thailand had pushed past 95 degrees. A small, privately operated animal attraction outside a rural town in Chiang Rai province offered supervised interaction sessions with captive tigers. The facility was not affiliated with any national conservation body and had been running close contact sessions for several years without a serious incident on record. Chloe Nguyen, a 24-year-old beauty and travel influencer from Houston, Texas, had a pattern of collaborating with exotic animal venues across Southeast Asia, framing the encounters as exclusive and aspirational. She arrived that afternoon with a personal photographer and a clear objective: seated portrait with a tiger at close range. What she did not account for was that the tiger had no interest in being part of anyone's content strategy. Handlers positioned her beside a 4-year-old male tiger that had been used in tourist interactions since it was a cub. The animal weighed approximately 385 pounds. 2 handlers were present, one roughly 15 feet to her left, the other near the enclosure entrance behind her. The instruction was standard: no sudden movement, no unsolicited contact, no repositioning without instruction. The session proceeded without incident for the first several minutes. As it continued, Nguyen became more comfortable and began adjusting her poses independently. The handler to her left turned briefly to speak with her photographer about the framing. At that moment, Nguyen reached behind her and placed her open hand against the tiger's flank, at a moment when the animal's attention had shifted sharply toward a noise outside the enclosure. Tigers are solitary predators, and even animals conditioned to human presence from a young age retain the full behavioral architecture of an apex predator. A male of this size carries between 130 and 175 pounds of muscle in the forelimbs and jaw, with retractable claws capable of opening deep lacerations in a single swipe. Captive tigers used in tourist interactions are not domesticated. They are habituated, and that distinction matters enormously. Habituation reduces the threshold for tolerating proximity. It does not eliminate the reflex that fires when an unexpected stimulus arrives from a direction the animal wasn't watching. I find it genuinely hard to watch this kind of scenario play out, because the facility itself is the problem before anyone even walks through the gate. The entire business model depends on people believing that a tiger sitting still is a tiger that is safe to touch. That belief is what these venues sell, and it is wrong every single time. It just doesn't always end badly enough for anyone to notice. The tiger turned and struck in a single motion. The handler to the left crossed the distance in roughly 2 seconds, enough time for the initial contact to be complete. The 2 handlers gave slightly different accounts afterward. One said the tiger had shown a brief ear flick before the strike. The other said there was no warning at all. In the chaos of those 2 seconds, neither account is surprising. Nguyen's photographer had been recording from near the enclosure entrance. The footage was surrendered to local authorities during the liability investigation and has not been released. The facility's legal representatives argued releasing it would prejudice the proceedings, and Nguyen's team declined to authorize distribution, citing the graphic nature of the content and her right to privacy. The footage remains sealed. Nguyen sustained severe lacerations to her right arm and shoulder, and a deep puncture wound to the upper chest. She survived after emergency surgery, but lost significant function in her right hand permanently. The facility did not reopen in its original form. Nguyen did not return to active content creation for over a year and described the moment of contact as instinctive. She had simply reached out without thinking. That description is the part that matters most, not recklessness in the dramatic sense. Just a hand moving without permission in a place where permission was the only thing keeping the situation controlled. That encounter happened inside a managed facility with handlers present. The next story removes every one of those safeguards: open water, fading light, and a stretch of river where the warnings had been posted long before he ever arrived. It was January 9th, 2018, and the wet season had swollen the river systems of a remote region in Australia's Northern Territory to their annual peak. The water was high, brown, and moving with deceptive speed. Saltwater crocodiles were active throughout the system, and the local land management authority had posted warning signs at every accessible entry point along a stretch of river roughly 140 miles southeast of Darwin. Ethan Cole, a 31-year-old outdoor and survival content creator from Portland, Oregon, had been filming a multi-part wilderness series in remote Australia for approximately 2 weeks. His channel had shifted progressively toward higher-risk content as audience growth plateaued. He had worked safely with a local guide for the first 10 days. The guide had declined to participate in any filming near the river after dark or during low visibility conditions, and had said so plainly more than once. Cole had nodded and kept filming. Cole filmed the final segment of the day alone. His camera was set up on a tripod on the bank, positioned to capture him wading into the shallows for a river crossing technique segment. The warning signs were visible from the filming position. He entered the water at approximately 6:40 in the evening, roughly 20 minutes before full dark. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptile species on Earth. Mature males in northern Australia commonly exceed 14 feet in length and 1,100 pounds. They are ambush predators that rely on near-total concealment beneath the surface, capable of remaining motionless for extended periods before striking with explosive acceleration. In murky, high-water conditions, detection from above the surface is effectively impossible. They are most active during low-light and nighttime hours, the precise window Cole had chosen to film. Their attack is a surface strike, followed immediately by a death roll, and once initiated, it leaves virtually no window for escape. That detail about low-light activity is the one that stays with me. Cole had spent 2 weeks filming in crocodile country. He had a guide who had told him directly. He knew what was in that water, and he walked in anyway, 20 minutes before dark in the wet season. Every variable was pointing the same direction, and I think that is the part that is genuinely hard to explain. Not the decision itself, but the confidence required to make it. The camera recorded Cole wading into the shallows, adjusting his footing and speaking 2 sentences towards the lens. A moment later, there was a disturbance in the water to his left, a sudden displacement, a brief churning at the surface, and then the frame was empty. The camera continued recording for another 11 minutes. The bank, the river, the fading light, just the water moving and then settling, and then nothing. The footage was recovered and submitted to the Northern Territory Police. What it showed in those final moments was described by the lead investigator as deeply distressing. It was not released publicly. The coroner's office retained it as part of the inquest record, and Cole's family requested through a representative in Oregon that it not be distributed regardless of what it showed. No portion has appeared online. Cole's body was found downstream 2 days later. No third party was found liable. The case was cited in a public safety bulletin on the risks of entering known crocodile habitat during low-light conditions without a spotter present. The warning signs were there before he ever reached the water. The guide had said it plainly. The light was already going. Every available signal pointed in the same direction, and he walked past all of them. That story ended in a river system where the danger was marked and known. The next one takes place inside a managed facility where the animal was familiar, the environment was controlled, and the mistake came from a breakdown in communication that no one caught in time. It was August 27th, 2013, and the monsoon season had brought intermittent heavy rain to the arid plains of Rajasthan. A small, privately operated elephant facility outside a rural town roughly 60 miles from Jaipur offered supervised interaction sessions with a small herd of captive Asian elephants. The facility employed a staff of mahouts and operated without formal affiliation to any national wildlife authority. Sofia Alvarez, a 29-year-old wellness and lifestyle influencer from Miami, Florida, had built her platform around the concept of spiritual connection with the natural world. She had arrived 3 days earlier and had participated in daily feeding and bathing sessions with the herd, developing a particular focus on one elephant, a 34-year-old female that staff had worked with for over a decade. Alvarez had described the animal detail in her content as gentle and emotionally present, which is the kind of language that sounds beautiful until you are standing in the wrong place. Two mahouts had observed the elephant displaying signs of agitation over the previous 2 days, intermittent ear flaring, foot shifting, and a tendency to turn away from handlers during feeding. They had discussed it between themselves. Whether that concern was ever communicated to the facility's owner, who approved guest access each morning, became the central question in the aftermath. One mahout said he had mentioned it. The owner said he had not been told. A third staff member said he had assumed someone else had passed it along. By the time Alvarez arrived for her session, no one had restricted her access or told her the animal had been behaving differently. Asian elephants are among the most powerful land animals on the continent. An adult female stands 8 to 9 feet at the shoulder and weighs between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds. Their defensive response when startled can include rapid turning, trunk strikes, and rear kicks, movements that generate force sufficient to cause fatal injury within striking range. The blind spot directly behind an elephant's hindquarters is a zone the animal cannot see into clearly. An unexpected presence there, particularly when baseline agitation has already been elevated, requires very little additional stimulus to produce a violent response. This is the part of the story I find hardest to sit with. The information existed. The mahouts had seen the signs. The system just had no reliable way to move that information to the person who needed it most. That is not a dramatic failure. It is a quiet one. And quiet failures are the ones that go unnoticed until it is too late. What bothers me most is that this kind of gap, where everyone assumes someone else has handled it, is not unique to elephant facilities in Rajasthan. It happens anywhere the cost of a missed handoff is invisible, right up until it isn't. During filming, Alvarez moved behind the elephant to capture a low-angle shot, placing herself directly in that blind spot. The mahout closest to her saw her move and stepped toward her but did not call out. He said afterward he had not wanted to make a sudden noise near the animal. He was still closing the distance when the elephant turned. Alvarez had set her phone to record from a small tripod nearby. The footage captured the moment of the incident. It was surrendered to local authorities as part of the civil dispute and has not been released. The facility's legal team argued releasing it would compromise the proceedings, and Alvarez's representatives made clear she did not want it distributed under any circumstances, citing both personal privacy and the distressing nature of what it showed. Alvarez was struck by the animal's rear leg and thrown against the enclosure wall. She was treated for a fractured pelvis, 3 broken ribs, and a collapsed lung, and survived after several weeks of hospitalization. The facility's liability was disputed and settled privately. The facility suspended visitor sessions for several months and subsequently required written mahout sign-off before any guest could be admitted to a session. The elephant had been showing signs for 2 days. Information existed. It just never made it to the person who needed it most, and in the gap between those 2 facts, there was no room left for anything to go right. That story turned on a failure of communication inside a managed facility. The next one is different in almost every way. Open wilderness, no staff, no enclosure, and the danger accumulated over days of decisions that each seemed small on their own. It was November 11th, 2017, and the first hard freeze of the season had settled over a remote stretch of boreal forest in interior Alaska, roughly 80 miles northeast of Fairbanks. The temperature had dropped to 12 degrees overnight. A small number of brown bears in the region had not yet entered full hibernation, moving through the forest in search of late-season caloric opportunities before denning. Ryan Brooks, a 33-year-old outdoor adventure content creator from Bozeman, Montana, had been filming a multi-episode series on living in proximity to apex predators for approximately 10 days. He had filmed distant bear sightings twice and described them in his content as the series building towards something closer. He was operating without a guide for the final 3 days after parting ways with a local outfitter over disagreements about filming access. That decision, to continue alone in active bear country in early winter, is one that is difficult to look at charitably in hindsight. The events of November 10th were pieced together from recovered camera footage and physical evidence documented by Alaska state troopers. Brooks had not secured his food cache before going to sleep. Whether that was deliberate or a lapse in judgment after a long day of solo filming, investigators could not determine with certainty. His notes referenced wanting a closer bear encounter for the series. Fish, cooking fat, and packaged meat were left in an unsecured bag approximately 30 feet from his tent. A camera on a tripod had been positioned facing the camp perimeter before he went to sleep. Brown bears in interior Alaska are among the largest terrestrial predators in North America, with adult males commonly weighing between 400 and 790 pounds. In the weeks before hibernation, bears enter hyperphagia, a period of intense caloric consumption that becomes the primary behavioral drive. Bears in this state can distinguish between food and humans, but when a bear has repeatedly located food at a human campsite, that association begins to override its natural wariness. It becomes increasingly willing to treat the person as an obstacle between itself and a reward it has already learned to expect. That shift is what makes food-conditioned bears so dangerous, and it can happen faster than most people realize. I keep thinking about what Brooks must have believed when he set that camera up and went to sleep, that he had calculated the risk, that he understood bears well enough to manage the situation in the morning. That kind of certainty, in a frozen forest at 12 degrees, with no partner and no emergency communication, is not bravery. In my opinion, it is the absence of an accurate picture of what you are actually dealing with, and that is the most dangerous state a person can be in out there. The camera recorded a large male bear approaching the unsecured food at approximately 5:20 in the morning. The bear fed for several minutes before moving toward the tent. The footage ends there. Brooks was found by a bush pilot 2 days later. The bear had returned to the campsite at least once after the initial encounter, based on tracks documented at the scene. The tripod footage was recovered by Alaska State Troopers and not released publicly. The troopers noted the final minutes recorded were graphic in nature. Brooks's next of kin in Montana requested through a legal representative that the footage not be shared under any circumstances, both out of respect for Brooks and to prevent it from circulating online. No portion has appeared publicly. The case was cited in a public advisory on unsecured food storage in active bear habitat. No other party was found liable. Whether the unsecured food was a mistake or a choice, the outcome was the same. The bear arrived. The food was gone quickly. Brooks was the only thing left. That story ended in a frozen forest where the margin for error had been removed piece by piece. The final story is different. A remote island, a reptile most people underestimate, and a man who had spent 2 days doing everything right. What ended his life wasn't recklessness. It was 2 steps backward without looking. It was May 6, 2016, and the dry season heat had settled over a small island in the Lesser Sunda chain of eastern Indonesia. The island was accessible only by a 2-hour boat crossing from the nearest inhabited port. A small ranger station operated on the island, staffed by 2 rangers who led guided walks along established trails through dry scrub forest and open grassland. Daniel Koenig, a 36-year-old documentary-style travel vlogger from Hamburg, Germany, had built his channel over 6 years around remote and rarely visited destinations. He had arrived 2 days earlier and spent the first day filming guided educational segments with the rangers, measured, careful, and respectful of their instructions throughout. Of all the people in this episode, Koenig is the one whose story sits differently because he was not chasing a thrill. He was doing his job carefully, and it still wasn't enough. On the second day, Koenig was filming a closing segment on the main trail, with one ranger standing approximately 20 feet ahead of him. The second ranger had moved to the trail's edge to monitor a dragon that had wandered close from the eastern scrub, a routine repositioning. Neither ranger had any indication a second dragon was present. The trail behind Koenig had appeared clear when the group passed through it minutes earlier. Komodo dragons are far more dangerous than their slow, lumbering reputation suggests. Adult males reach 8 to 10 feet in length and weigh up to 150 pounds. They are opportunistic ambush predators that rely on stillness and concealment, striking with sudden explosive acceleration. Their serrated teeth cause severe lacerations, and their saliva carries bacteria and venom components that actively inhibit blood clotting and accelerate tissue breakdown, meaning the damage from a bite continues long after the animal has disengaged. They are not long-distance pursuit predators. What makes them dangerous is not persistence. It is that their approach is completely silent, and their strike gives no warning. That silence is what I find most unsettling about Komodo dragons. Most dangerous animals give you something: a growl, a posture shift, a charge you can at least see coming. A Komodo dragon closing the distance behind you on a trail looks like an animal moving through its habitat. There is nothing to read, nothing to react to. By the time the distance has closed enough to matter, the warning has already passed. Koenig's camera had been running on a tripod throughout the closing segment. The footage recorded the attack. It was recovered by the rangers and submitted to the Island Authority, then forwarded to the Indonesian Ministry of Environment and Forestry as part of a broader safety review. It has not been publicly released. The ministry cited the graphic and distressing nature of the content, and Koenig's family in Germany formally requested through the German consulate in Surabaya that the footage not be distributed out of respect for Koenig and those who knew him. That request has been honored. The ranger ahead responded immediately, using his forked stick to pry the animal's jaws open and drive it back. The dragon released and retreated into the scrub in under 15 seconds. Koenig had sustained deep lacerations to his calf and a significant puncture wound. Above the ankle, he was conscious and able to speak. The nearest surgical facility was on the mainland, a 2-hour boat crossing followed by a road transfer. The bleeding was difficult to control, and the tissue damage was more extensive than the external wounds suggested. Koenig lost consciousness during the crossing and died approximately 5 to 6 hours after the attack. The combination of blood loss, clotting disruption, and delayed access to care proved fatal. The investigation found no negligence on the part of the rangers. The Island Authority revised trail protocols to require both rangers to maintain continuous visual coverage of the full group perimeter at all times. He had spent 2 days being careful. He had listened to the rangers, followed the trails, and produced responsible content. The dragon that killed him had been there the entire time, moving quietly while everyone's attention was somewhere else. The only thing that changed was 2 steps backward, and there was no way to know they were the last 2 he would take.